Cari amici sportivi, welcome. Welcome again, guys. It's Thursday night. Guys, you know what time it is? It's time for the local soccer show, guys. And the local soccer show, guys, brought to you by Evangelista Sport, guys. That's your mecca for caucho and other soccer apparel. Guys, fantastic stuff. I know it's been a little bit of a depressing couple of weeks, especially if you follow the Azzurri. But we thought we would put on the local soccer show tonight to bring us a little bit back down to earth and back to our local grassroots, because I think the Italians need to take a page out of the local soccer show and go back down to the grassroots and see how they can rebuild and come back with something of a little bit of a stronger project to represent this crest, this beautiful crest over here, with four World Cup championships and 2 Euro champions. Now, if we would have fast forward and in a perfect world, Italy would have qualified with our fantastic guest this week. I would have had a lot of bragging rights. But you'll tell by his accent once I bring him on, he kind of owns all the bragging rights now. And guys, it's another great technical director. It's someone that it's going to be the first time that I meet him as well. I'd like to give a warm welcome from the local soccer show to Mr. Steven Weston. Steven, welcome to the local soccer show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And up until a week ago, you would have had bragging rights over the English national team, but I'm afraid I'm sorry for your Italian counterparts that it's difficult to brag at the moment.
Yeah, not something that I was gonna start with, but again, I did go on Milan Weekly Podcast, which is our Monday show where we talk everything Milan, everything Azzurri, everything Serie A, and my thought process was over there is like, I get it, I'm disappointed. It's not something that I'm gonna say that I predicted, but it happened. It's over with. But as a generation, I was lucky enough to watch a World Cup champion and watch a Euro champion, something that unfortunately I'm going to age you now. I don't think you were able to see as an English football fan.
No, definitely not. And I'm not that confident that I ever will.
Well, that's a discussion for another time. But let's introduce you. So you're the technical director at CSR. That's Club de Soccer Roussillon. I love pronouncing it Roussillon. Guy, everybody's saying, how did this gentleman from England land in CSR? So if you can tell people who don't know who Steven Weston is, give us a little story about Steven and how you got from the land of the Queen to Canada.
Yeah, I still somehow managed to end up in another one of her lands. But yeah, originally I'm from England. I've been in Canada now for 12 years. I left England when I was 18 years old to go to the States. I was playing a pretty decent amateur semi-professional level in England. I left for a soccer scholarship in America. I ended up in Atlanta at a D2 school, a pretty good soccer school. And I met my now wife there, who is from Montreal, from the South Shore of Montreal. I first came over here I think in about 2008 or 2009 to visit, which is where I first got involved with coaching over here as a volunteer, actually at NDG. And then I left and came back with a visa. I didn't speak any French. Trying to find a job was not super easy, but I managed to get my foot in the door at Longueuil, actually on the South Shore. And from Longueuil, going with a coach, I worked my way into the South Shore Soccer Association, working in the Sport Études there. And then from there, I came over to Bourassa in Montreal North and Anjou and Saint-Léonard, where I was the assistant technical director for a little while, and then passed as the regional technical director for 2 years. Really enjoyed my time there. And from there, I moved to the South Shore to take over a club technical director role with Roussillon. And I've been there. This is the beginning of my 5th year.
Amazing, Steven. That's something that I tip my hat to you because I come from a generation from immigrant parents that left Italy and came here with nothing, and it was tough for them. But those were those times. Your travel was a bit different, but still tough in itself, right? It passes. The English accent is probably looked upon strangely in Georgia or Atlanta, wherever you were there in the States, but once you land here, especially in Quebec, we know with the never-ending French-English battle, how tough was that for you to adjust to not being someone who speaks the primary language anymore?
So when I first arrived, we lived on the South Shore, and when I arrived, which was 12 years ago, it was a lot more francophone, or it seemed to be that way at least. So I found that a little bit difficult. I was very willing to learn French. I wanted to learn French when I came here. It was one of my goals. But it's not super easy to do. And we moved to Montreal quite quickly after moving here. And the difficulty with learning French in Montreal is that so many people are bilingual that to learn it, I really had to force myself to try and speak it. But then when people heard me struggling through French, they'd speak to me in English because they're nice. And I found that to be really challenging. And I got to be honest, I thought at the beginning, like, this is impossible. I'm never going to be able to do this. It was frustrating as far as getting a job because in England, speaking a second language is it's an asset. Over here, it's a basic kind of need, even like at a basic level of a job for a lot of them anyway, not all of them, of course. So I find it difficult kind of getting like an entry level job just because I couldn't speak French. But yeah, 12 years later, I've picked it up somehow, and I'm happy that I have.
Amazing, congratulations. Now we have it's again congratulations is not even enough. Like there's some people that should be listening to this podcast and having that goal, but vice versa. Having trouble having to learn a little bit of English just so that we could all be bilingual and all live in peace without this language law. Again, another episode. Maybe I'll start a political one in the future, but we'll keep it to local soccer here. We have so many guys who listen to the podcast and write to me saying, great experience, loved your guest, and I was excited to have you on because if you watch Milan Weekly podcast, uh, for that one, it's a bit easier for me. I don't need to prepare. I watch the game and I give my opinion. But with the guys and the guests at the local soccer show, I put in the time and I do the research. I do the research because I respect the craft that you guys put so much time and effort for, and and your journey, and that's what I want people to know. Like you left England, which is a soccer centric country, to come and take a scholarship in the United States, where soccer kind of maybe is at fourth place in the top sports. How did you find that adjustment? Where I don't know what school you were at, and if you want to say which school, but a lot of the American universities, it's basketball, football, and then everybody else.
So so again, like when I left in 2003, it's crazy to think, but it was a very different time, and to get the information for me was very new. It wasn't something that a lot of people were doing necessarily. It was quite difficult to get hold of that information of how to go through the process of it. I just knew that I wanted to play football, soccer. And in England, I was playing at a pretty decent level. I didn't know if I wanted to go to university. I accidentally ran into an old friend that had moved into America and was back in England visiting, and he spoke to me about it. And I went through this process and got in touch with different schools who got back in touch with me. And it's quite a long process. And for me, there was only an option to go with a scholarship, because as a foreign student, the fees go up exponentially. I got a couple of very interesting offers from very big schools, but they weren't full scholarships, and even with what they were offering, it was just impossible. I ended up in a school called Clayton State, which is in Atlanta, or just on the outskirts of Atlanta. It's a fairly small school by American standards, about 10,000 people that go there. And the reason I chose it, I narrowed it down a short list, and I went over there to visit. And basically it came down to the fact that it had a fantastic soccer program. And exactly as you mentioned, I went to visit a couple of schools where soccer was maybe the fifth or sixth choice. In fact, one of the training sessions I did was at midnight because the soccer team can't get into the inside field until the football had gone through it, until the basketball had gone through it, so it just kind of showed you whereabouts soccer was concerned. And when I got to Clayton, it was a fantastic, soccer-centric program. Soccer and basketball were the two biggest sports, but they run in two different seasons, so there was no real overlap with them. And there was a big a foreign community as well, which is very important for me. So a lot of guys from South America and Europe and Africa, and so we built this kind of like expat community, which was really nice. And I loved it. I had a fantastic time. I got to be honest, I went over there in the time expecting to kind of discover a pretty weak level of football, but that's not what I discovered. So it was a pretty big shock in a certain extent, but I really, really enjoyed it.
Amazing experience. Amazing. Uh, Steven, again, you play, and it's not everybody, and we talked about it before. Not everybody who plays at whatever level, high, mid, low, not everybody can make that transition from player to, I'm going to say, coach, technical director, a position where they need to make decisions in terms of like how their ex teammates are now going to be training, or the youth is going to be developing. What took you from Steven the soccer player to, let's start, just Steven the coach?
Yeah, so the first steps were pretty simple. It just came down to the fact that I was playing soccer and I needed to earn a little bit of money. And I had teammates or ex-teammates that were coaching. It was easy to work around my schedule. It was something I felt that I could do pretty easily. And to be honest, I fell into it completely accidentally. Just picking up a few hours there in a flexible schedule, earning a little bit of money while I was at college. And then when I was going back to England during my summer holidays, a bit of a similar thing. I was looking for kind of part-time work where I knew I wasn't going to be there the whole year, and kind of fell into coaching in summer schools and camps and stuff like that. And I kind of just got the bug for it, really. I realized it's something that I really enjoyed doing. I worked with all different kinds of levels, and it really kind of it gave me the bug of coaching. I really enjoyed like trying to pass on what I could onto these young kids at different levels, and it kind of just went from there. And I built it. I actually got offered a full-time job just as I was graduating from America. So I was kind of in a decision: do I stay in America for another year and try and earn a visa to stay, or do I go back to England and start this job? And I ended up going back to England. I started within like this kind of private coaching school, which then led to a really, really amazing job that I really enjoyed working within, like a pretty deprived community of London, working specifically with futsal, actually. And the idea was targeting young at-risk communities and kind of giving them this tool to kind of stay away from crime and stay away from drugs and keep in school and stuff like that. And it was amazing. I absolutely adored it. And then it was kind of, I had a decision to kind of move back to Montreal over here. And when I got here, football was the kind of thing that I knew I wanted to do. I started off by volunteering while I was looking for work, and it kind of just snowballed. And I got to be honest, I wasn't necessarily thinking this was going to be my career path. It's kind of ended up that way. And
Yeah.
the more I've been into it, the more I've enjoyed it, the more I've kind of discovered, and the more I've learned, and the more I learn, the more I want to learn. So that's kind of how it's going.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, because not everybody can say that they work their dream job, or they work in a field where they've put in so many hours, and now can reap the benefits financially, because in the end, yes, soccer and football, however you want to call it, is beautiful, but for you guys, going to school, the scholarship, and if it's not the pro level, if you can stay in soccer and make a life of it, with your family, uh, that's superb. It's excellent. It's something that not a lot of people could say, right? So
I think it's something that's probably not available everywhere. I think in England, like these kind of roles don't necessarily exist within community soccer. There's not a full-time job to be had unless you're within a professional structure. I would also say, although you're right, and I am working within, the sport that I love and generally doing what I love, as I'm sure you've heard in the past, and I'm sure you're well aware, the job of a technical director is not so much technical and does fall a lot into the administration and logistical and operational side of things. So there's a huge amount of management involved, and some of it is fantastic and some of it can be difficult. We're a club of 2,300 members, so we're quite a big club. And as you can imagine, trying to please 2,300 members, maybe times two, considering their parents, is not always the easiest task, and it can be quite political sometimes. And you might go in on a Monday morning expecting to do one thing and end up spending your week doing something completely different.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the sad part of the job. But again, there's sad parts to everybody's job, and and yes, it's parents, and yes, it's convincing them that this is recreational soccer, and you're trying to make everybody happy, but in the end, people need to realize not everybody's going to be happy all the time. Before we go into some of the questions that I have for you, and the questions that are coming in from the live viewers, you touched on something really important, and I wanted to ask you this because you grew up and went through the ranks in England in terms of like starting at a local level, and where you ended up deciding to leave and come to America to get that scholarship, compared to here now that you're coaching in here. You tell two different structures. Can you tell people, just explain to them the differences between the two structures?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest difference is that the local like civil structures are much bigger here. So, for instance, like I just mentioned, our club incorporates 2,300 members. We have kids from 4 years old up until over 35 years old. Men and women. In England, where you might join a local club, they might have 3 teams, like maybe 4. It's unlikely they have men's and women's. They might have one or the other. Now probably a little bit more so, but when I was playing it was one or the other usually. So the structures were much smaller. Where I played in my local club, they had a men's team. The majority of local clubs do have that men's team. So you kind of have an aspiration maybe to get into the first team. Not all of them, but some of them do. So it's a lot more. I guess it seems a lot more accessible. On the reverse side of things, that I'm conscious that because they're a lot smaller, because it's a lot more accessible to play. That's another thing, to play in England, to play in most places in the world, it's next to nothing as far as money goes, as far as finances go. Whereas in America and North America and Canada, it's a sport that maybe compared to other American sports is not super expensive, but it's still expensive. It still costs a lot of money. So there's those differences. So that puts a barrier up to players that come from a background that might not be able to afford things, that might not be able to afford to play, or afford to play at the level that they're capable to play, because the higher the level they play over here, the more expensive it gets.
If I could just ask a question within the question, because you brought up the topic of money. So how does that club sustain itself if it's not charging the players
I mean, it's
exorbitant, a reasonable amount of money to play?
It's completely different. I mean, first of all, the coach in general is not paid, or paid very little, maybe his expenses, but paid very little. It's unlikely that there is a paid, definitely not a full-time technical director, unless you're working within a professional club, or certain semi-professional structures maybe, but generally there wouldn't be. So there's not the same overheads by any means. Another big difference is, let's say you turn up to play in a club here, the chances are, depending on the level, that You turn up, you have your full kit, you have your brand new socks, your shorts, you have two kits, you have your home, your away. A lot of clubs, they have the jersey, like the jacket. They might have a full tracksuit. You turn up to play. There's three referees. The grounds are floodlit. You're playing on synthetic fields. Generally, that stuff is not available to you might have parents volunteering to be the linesman, or you generally have a referee, but the linesmen are kind of on the side, so you do have a fee for the referee. The kit, generally you wear it for the game, and then you put it back in the bag. It gets washed by a volunteer and comes back the next week, and you just pick your number again. So I think the overheads and the investment is a lot less. I think that has positives and negatives, because I can tell you about some of the horrendous, parks and fields that I've played on in England, where you can't even see the ball. The field is so long, or it's that you can't see one of the goals because it's on a slope. So I mean, the infrastructure cannot be as good. Elsewhere, there are some beautiful grass fields. Whereas here, there's a lot of investment that's put into, especially, into synthetic fields. You've got stands at most of the fields. You turn up to a kid's youth game at U13 level. The kids are 12 years old. They're playing under floodlights. They've got 3 qualified referees, fully kitted up. They do an entrance into the field. It's almost like you're watching the mini Champions League. I mean, it's amazing to an extent, but to another extent, it's almost like they've lived that part of it at 13 years old. So what are they aspiring to almost to some extent?
Yeah, that's something that I didn't know. I didn't know that aspect of it, especially, let's say, on the English side. There, I think, let's say, more because of my Italian background, a little bit more on the Italian side. But I didn't know 3 teams and not really heavily invested in trouble with pitches, because here our trouble with pitches, not really the pitch, it's the weather.
Yeah.
It's like 6 months out of the year you're playing on synthetic in a dome if you're lucky, right? So again, that's something that I'm pretty sure everybody will appreciate, because everybody didn't know. And then that brings up another question: how come it took us so long to make it back to the World Cup if our infrastructure is so much better than England's?
Because I think it's got to do with the culture of the sport. The infrastructure might not be great, but you go down to any park, and there might not be any nets on the goals, or you play into a car park even that's you don't have anything set up like in most countries, and kids are going to play. They might play 2v2. They might play 15 versus 13. It's whoever brings the ball to the park. You play until they go home. It's the culture is different. I come from London. In London, we're I think about 12, 13 million people, and every young boy, or almost every young boy, and more so now, girls as well, want to play football. Like, they want to be a professional footballer. And I think here it's becoming that, and this Canada team is going to give that more and more to the next generation. It's unbelievable now. Just the other day, we were doing a training, and we were pretending to be, I don't know, Canada against Portugal or something. And, the kids are like, I want to be Jonathan David. I want to be Alphonso Davis. And I've never heard them say that before. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I'm sure within the next couple of years, they'll start wearing Canada jerseys to practice. And right now it's Real Madrid and Barcelona, and maybe AC Milan as well, depending where you are in Montreal. But I think the culture is there. Most people grow up surrounded by it, and that's what they want to do, or it's been passed on to them from their family. And although I think, even now with our kids, the kids that are playing now, most of their parents played soccer. I don't think most of their parents had that aspiration maybe to be a professional soccer player, or to follow their team, to follow CF Montreal or the Impact, or whatever they were before. But I think it's becoming more and more that. And I think that's really the one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I agree. I could take myself as an example. Love the sport, but I knew very young and got told very young by my parents, like, this is not something that you're gonna be able to continue. and you have to take that as constructive criticism and move on to something else, right? So, but on your point there, I can tell you that at my home, there's two little kids that roll around in Milan jerseys, and they don't put on anything else. It's very rare. Uh, I would like to go now to the again where where you're focusing a lot of your time, and at CSR and the great work that you do. But there's one thing that really interests me when I was starting to just look up on Steven, and because I never met him before, and one of the things that caught my eye is you went from regional to club. How was that different, being at a region like Barassa and now going to be the TD for club level at Roussillon?
So that's yes, it's an interesting question. I've kind of done it in like the opposite way of what you would expect the hierarchy to be. You would generally expect a career path to go from club to region, and maybe provincial, and so on. And basically, I turned up at a region, quite a small region, Barassa, with a fantastic base of players. A huge immigrant population, Italians, North African. We had some fantastic players, but a very small region. So the whole region of Barassa is probably about the same size as the club I'm at now. And what I found within the region, and it's a region of only 3 clubs, what I found is that what I wanted to pass down, what I wanted to diffuse within the clubs was very difficult to get through to each club. I felt like the hierarchy was kind of broken. It's changing. The structure has completely changed since I was at the region, and it is continuously changing, and it's changing for the better. But I had the sense that the region was pulling against the federation was pulling against the region, the clubs were pulling against everyone was kind of doing their own thing, pulling the children, the players, each in a different direction. Often financially, because you have to pay for your club, pay for your regional program, pay for if you're lucky enough to get selected to the provincial programs. And I kind of said to myself, if I go to a club with an interesting project where I can actually put my imprint, I can actually have a bigger effect. Because I mean, although I'm no dictator by any means, I'm very collaborative. I feel like what I want to put in place, I will have a lot more ease to put in place. I have a lot more chance of convincing the people that this is how we should do things, and the feedback cycle was a lot easier. Whereas as a technical director of a region, I was only 3 clubs. I mean, imagine someone like the South Shore or Lac St. Louis, where they're 12 or 15 clubs. You can imagine every single club has their own MO, and everyone wants to kind of do their own way or adapt it a little bit, and it's difficult to kind of to get that message to pass. So that was originally why I made that decision.
At the again, just touching again, just at your time at the region. So 3 clubs, not that many. You had issues. I'm imagining that nowhere's perfect. We're nowhere clear to perfect. What was more of the problem at, you said there was like this power struggle? Was it someone wanted to be the face of the region? Someone, there was no collaborative effort from the 3 clubs? Again, without naming and getting too personal, it's
Yeah,
something that's important to know.
I think it stems from the top. I think Soccer Quebec today have put a structure in place that's very clear. That stems from Soccer Canada. Soccer Canada is sending a message to Soccer Quebec, who is sending a message to the regions, who is sending a message to their clubs. And although there's some movement within that, the direction is much clearer now. There wasn't that, up until 3 years ago, to maybe even 2 years ago, there wasn't that structure in place. And so everyone could kind of, to some extent, do whatever they wanted. And it's not necessarily that someone wanted to be the face of the region. It's just, it's difficult to argue with a club that your regional program is more important than the club program. So a player of 12 or 13 years old, they might have to miss a practice with their club to represent the region, because the region maybe they have more qualified staff, maybe they're in a slightly more a slightly better environment for progression, maybe not, but that's kind of the argument. And then from there, it's the province saying, well, we want to take these kids from the Sport Etudes to put them into the CNHP. And there's kind of all these conflicts everywhere, no clear kind of way for it to move. And it's a lot clearer now. So, they've done a fantastic job by the way of sorting things out. There's still a long way to go, but it's definitely a lot clearer now.
Yeah, and you touched on the message. Canada having the message for Quebec, and Quebec having the message for the region, and the region having the message for the clubs. So they came, and that message was the licensing program. So it's a question, and again, people are going to say you asked this to everybody. It's probably the most important question of our podcast, coming from someone who was doing his own thing, and being at a region where everybody was trying to do their own thing. Now there's this licensing program, this structure to get a specific license. What's one thing you liked about this new club licensing initiative, and one thing that you don't like about it?
Yeah, so that's so I think the idea of standardizing the services offered by clubs has been a long time coming. I can't believe that it's only just come about. And, the idea of doing it is fantastic, in my opinion. Clubs had no kind of like follow through. No one was checking, what they're doing, not just within soccer, but within security. Like what's the security? Are the kids safe? Are they practicing in a safe environment? Are they being coached by appropriately qualified people? Are they, do they have access to what they need, to be happy, to have fun? And, that is, for me, it's obligatory. It's absolutely crucial. And again, I think a lot of people doubted Soccer Quebec and Soccer Canada to be able to put something of this scale into place. And I think they've gone far and above what most people were expecting. I would say on paper, there's that. I would say in reality, there are things that I feel might be a little bit too set in stone, let's say. So, for instance, today, to have a certain license gives you access to a certain level of play. Now, for me, that doesn't make sense, because I think there should be a standard. I think your club should be recognized if they're able to meet certain criteria. Absolutely. Then a player that's making a decision about where he's going to move, maybe that comes into account. A parent, maybe that comes into account as well. Absolutely. But let's say in our case, I'll speak for us personally, and I know it's the case of a lot of other clubs that find themselves in a regional license. So we're a regional licensed club. We'd applied for a provincial license. So the way we find ourselves is that, we've been developing, these young players within, some kind of, we were working within a CDC environment, even though we didn't call it CDC. We had communal practices with our young players. We had our best coaches working with them. And we're starting to see the rewards of that. Now, those players get to a certain level. They get to 13 and 14 years old, and they're competitive within their leagues. They're not the best teams in Quebec, but they're very competitive. And 90% of those teams, 95% of those teams have come from our youth programs. Now, all of a sudden, we're being told that, well, these are good players, but they can't access the highest level. So you have to send them elsewhere. Now, the problem with that is that you have players that don't want to leave the club. They're happy in their environment. They're happy, playing close to home. They're happy having the service. And now they have to go to a different environment. For the best players, now maybe the one or two, maybe the third best player of the team, okay, if another club can offer a better service, fine. I completely understand that. But what's the reality of it is that it's not just the first or the second or the third, because it's now the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth who are leaving to play in the same competition that's offered by our club. But because there's a possibility maybe in a year or 2 years or however many years that maybe they'll be able to get into the next level or the first team of their category. So, the free circulation of players, it's on paper is a good idea, but in reality, it's caused a lot of problems. And what that has as a secondary effect on the players that stay at the club is a massive loss of motivation. Um, we've seen a lot of players stop. Obviously, there's the pandemic to consider in that. I don't think that's helped at all. I think the two things have kind of converged to make one big problem, or to kind of fast forward a lot of players' decisions to do that. But I think to a certain extent, it's having a negative effect in that respect.
Yeah. So again, that was you answered basically my other question, and it's something that I talk with Presidente, who's guys. A special thank you to Presidente in the background, that master control. He's putting up the questions, he's putting up the banners, he sets up everything. Thank you to that, guys. Again, we're 36 minutes in, and I have a ton more questions. So I hope you have time, Steven. But I would have to thank again Evangelista Sport, guys. They help us put this on. Uh, you know, uh, they're the place to get your Canada gear, get Serie A gear, EPL gear, Bundesliga. They have MLS gear, CF Montreal. Guys, it's just a great place. Especially if you're in Montreal, stop. It's in Little Italy, our great Little Italy that we need to bring back to the highest quality. That's dipped a bit, but Evangelista Sport, guys, and evangelistasports.com online. They ship everywhere. We have guys in the Milan club that purchase from Toronto, from the states, and they ship everywhere. So thank you for that, and thank you, Evangelista Sport. Steven, what I wanted to say, I'm afraid, and this is a topic that we've said and talked about so many times on the local soccer show with tons of people, coaches, TDs, and even before the locker show, the local soccer show, and we were just doing this in the pandemic, where we wanted to get guys, Jason Di Tullio, and get pick the brain of Rocco Placentino, and pick the brain of Andrea Di Petrantonio, so on and so forth. Guys like Mike Vitulano at Soccer Quebec, Marco Masucci, doing his own thing. My biggest thing and my biggest fear with this licensing program is that we're gonna come to a point where we've done all this hard work, and like you said, for CSR, doing all this hard work. Will it come to a time where everybody's gonna have this national license? Then there's no point of the licensing program. Because in theory, what you're saying is, if you don't have a provincial or a national license, people are going to look to leave the regional clubs, and that's not the root of the licensing program.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that is the objective. I think that's like a byproduct of what's been put in place. I know it's not. I know that Mike doesn't want players to leave their local clubs. He
No,
wants them
and
to
I'm
be
not
at the
saying
highest
again.
level.
Let's
No,
be. We're on the internet. The internet's forever.
sure.
I'm not saying that Mike. I know Mike's role in it, and I know that's not his
Yeah,
intention. But as humans,
yeah.
as again, it's morphing into that. It's
I think
morphing into this problem.
I think if Soccer Quebec had their choice, I'm sure they would like every club to be a national club. But in reality, knowing what the criteria is, there's no way that they could be. The amount of resources, administrative and technical resources that are required to get to a national level is pretty incredible. Actually, is to go from what was essentially recreational and very amateur to kind of professionalizing the amateur structure is it's a huge step. And I don't think the majority of clubs could reach that level if I'm completely honest.
No, and then that's that. Again, that's okay, but that's what I think the message from Soccer Quebec has to be. That's okay,
Mm.
and I think it's Soccer Quebec's. I'm not gonna say it's their. They have to do it, but it would be a recommendation of mine, is explain and educate to the parents exactly what's happening,
Yeah,
and make people understand what the licensing program is. If Soccer Quebec, again, Mike has come on multiple times, but Mike can do only so much. You understand? There's
sure.
there's above him that need to speak and be open about this, and what their goal is, right? And I don't think that's happening. And again, everybody knows me. I say it the way it is, and I'm not afraid. We need Soccer Quebec to be more transparent regarding this whole licensing thing and where it's going to take these clubs, because it affects the CSRs of the world. It affects all the other smaller, or I'm not even saying smaller, but regional clubs. It's going to affect them. And like you said, once you start hearing people are stopping to play, that's counterproductive to what the goal is, right? Now you're saying people are stopping to play. Again, is this a financial thing? Is this more because they just have lost the passion because they've lost so many teammates? What's for them? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think again it's difficult, to discount the pandemic. Obviously, this has had a massive, role in everything. But I definitely see, um, let's say within the old system, although the old system is not necessarily something I agree with, there was four mute players that could go in one club. So let's say if a player was leaving from CSR to your club today, um, you could only take a certain amount of those players, or a club could only take a certain amount of those players. Now, if you're a good team, you're probably not going to want four of my players. You might want one of my players and another player from another team, etc. Today, you can accommodate as many of my players as you want, as many as anyone else's players as you
The
want. So
borders are open. The
borders
borders
are
are
open.
open.
So what's happening and what I'm seeing, and I don't really hold any grudges, because there's not. I don't know if I wouldn't be doing the same thing if I was in that position either. I just think it's not something that they had been considered. But let's say your club has got a first team, and the first team is playing in the highest level, so the PLS GQ, and they have a great team. They want to build the best team, so they get all these new players, and they get the best players from all over the region, and they make this fantastic team. Now they've got players left over, and they're gonna keep taking the players. So let's say they might take our fourth best player and our fifth best player to make their second team. So now they've got a first team, a PLSGQ team, and they've also got a regional team, a very, very strong regional team that's made up with players that are on the cusp of getting to the highest level. And what we're left with is the players, the second half of the team that are good players and good people and good kids and deserve to carry on playing. But without that one or two players that were kind of driving them on, that were helping them they become much less competitive as a team. And now what's happening is they're playing against this team.
Juggernaut. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, a juggernaut. Where they're rotating these players, these PLSGQ players, because they've got way too many of them. So they're rotating them within the lower leagues or the lower level of competition. Our teams are playing, one half of soccer, which is pretty competitive, and a second half where they're just being annihilated. And they're coming off the field and they're like, what is the point of doing this? And then, so the next option is, okay, so we'll register them into a lower level of competition. So instead of being AA or regional, we'll put them into A. But a lot of them are like, I don't want that. I wanted to play with this group. That was my team. And so a lot of them are stopping, or a lot of them are, doing other things. And I think the pandemic has a huge part to play, but I don't think we should discredit the part that the new, reconnaissance has had as well.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. Very transparent there, Steven. I agree with you 100%. We talk about this, and again, I don't like to bring up the money too often on the local soccer show, but like sometimes it's important. So there's some people that have written to myself or Presidente, and they said, you know what, we want to understand. Like, there's some people that believe that there's too much money collected to pay the regions on the fees, and it's kind of like being wasted. Like, the investment that these parents are making, some of it, obviously, guys, nothing is for free. I understand it needs to go to the region for the affiliation, but that money, is it better invested on the pitch or off the pitch? Like, is there a happy medium? Is it like 80-20, 80 on the pitch, 20 off, 60-40, 50-50? Like, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, it's so going back to the old system, how it was before, I think the region played a more important role as far as technical development goes. Like the regional programs were a lot more important. The sport etudes were a lot more important. The reality is that with the new structure, national clubs and even provincial clubs are kind of required to offer 4 to 5 trainings a week for their players. So why? I mean, it's almost ridiculous that a player is going to a sport études 5 times a week and then having to train another 4 times a week with their club. So there's got to come a point where that structure is kind of is relooked at. The regional teams have already been restructured, that they're starting at a later age because the clubs are now running all their own CDCs. I think the regions, they're already starting to do it, but they need to find a new goal or a new aim or a new purpose. Really, I don't think that's their purpose anymore. I don't think. Maybe, a regional team, yes, but I think they need to be a lot more in support of the clubs. They need to have a lot more administrative support. They need to have a lot more technical support as well, coming to see us, coming to help us with what we're doing in our CDCs, what we're doing with our 11-a-side teams, because we're missing staff everywhere. I know they are as well. They probably would argue they don't have the manpower to send them out everywhere, but they really should, in my opinion, be offering more in that respect. They've centralized all the local trainings, like coaches certifications through the regions. I think that's a good idea, but I really think they need to do more. They need to be training the coaches. They need to be offering help. So to answer your question, I don't really know. There's definitely that perception that we're paying a lot of money for the regions. What are we really paying it for? I've heard that a lot. I don't know if I can give you a definitive answer, but I definitely
but
think
it's again,
their role has to change.
Steven, we talked off air. It's not to put you in a bad spot, and I would never want to do that. It's just it's something that we need to talk about, because for me,
Yeah.
I think technology would help. I think if the region takes some of that money, and it's not on the pitch with facilities and stuff like that, I think that the coaches, whether it be volunteer or technical director, if you're armed with technology, some sort of technology that makes your job easier, I think that can reduce, and again, I don't want to sound like Terminator 2, but sometimes technology helps with that lack of manpower. But you have to be willing to invest, and you have to be willing to open that conversation, right? Because I understand some people are working and they make a living off this, but technology can help you guys. Like if they can't come because feasibly it's very expensive for them to travel all over to the province, well, what about conferences where video, and where they're holding their own training and they're showing you via their training? Or have clubs learn from each other, CSR and CSRDP. Let's see what you guys do in your training, and let's see what CSRDP does in their training, and hey, let's talk about this. But I find that there's this divide and this fear of exchanging information, because I want to hold my cards close to my chest. Well, guys, I don't know if you all noticed, we didn't invent these drills. Someone invented them. And someone invented them because he copied somewhere else. Andrea Di Pretantonio, the last week, he said something and it stayed with me. And it's one of the things that pushed me. This is my big announcement, everybody, that I'm going to be coaching for CSRDP for the first time officially since my son, Gianfranco, started at 4 years old. I've always been helping, never officially went in. But Andrea said something last week that kind of pushed me, talking to guys like yourself, Steven, and guys like Mike Vitulano and Marco and Jason. Copy and adapt, because that's exactly what everybody does. They copy someone's drill and then adapt to the circumstances. So, like, what are we as people that are in this soccer, I'm going to call it business, but no, it's not really a business. What are we afraid of sharing information? I don't get that.
No, you're 100% right, and that's definitely a role that the regions could play, and it maybe even filtering from Soccer Quebec, but you're right. I mean, there should be some kind of identity of the region. There should definitely be resources. I mean, we're left to do that in our clubs, and now maybe people would argue that okay, that should be our job within our club, and maybe it is to some extent, and that's what we do. We train our coaches. We're responsible for having trainings for all of them, beginning of year seasons, putting conferences on, making sure they're up to date with things. And that's definitely something that could be helped with. And to your point with technology, then absolutely things could be, shared a little bit better. And why not, more conferences that are offered for all the clubs and a bit more sharing of things. Some clubs are fantastic about it. I shout out to Longueuil that often put on things. They often put on coaches conference and invite other clubs to come and visit, often free of charge, which is, fantastic from their part. But that should be something that the region is looking into. They offer, once a year, they offer a symposium where, the coaches of the regional teams, come and, we have a meeting, which is great. But could it be more? Could there be more get-togethers? I'll tell you, actually, while we're on this subject, one of the things that the South Shore is doing very, very well at the moment, although it's at the very beginning, is the promotion of female soccer, of girls soccer. And there's a new technical assistant, actually, that's come in, and she's started to build like a cohort of female coaches. And now what's really interesting is she's offering it for different levels. So there's the coaches that have the aspirations to get to a higher level, to do their certifications, but it's also for the coaches that really have never done it before, that, are hesitating about whether to get into it. And it's a very kind of friendly atmosphere, and she's organizing activities, and it's fantastic. And, I'm looking forward to kind of implementing some of the things that they've talked about within our club. But it's more things like that, I think, that the region should be occupying their time with as resources for us, for the development of our, not necessarily our players, but probably our staff, even more than anything else. Like you said, that we could share, certain technological things between ourselves, whether it be sessions, whether it be presentations, conferences, whatever. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. On that topic, sharing, we have the CDC. So the CDC is in place because of the licensing program, and that's the message from Canada to Quebec, Quebec to the regions to the clubs. Same question as before. Again, second most important question of the podcast. What's one thing that you like about the new CDC program, and one thing that you would like to see improved for the CDC?
So the idea of giving the same service to everybody, or giving access to the same service, I think that's probably like the little gray area about it. I think the importance is not necessarily the same service for everyone, but giving them access. So a player that wants to train twice or three times a week should be able to. And I completely agree with that. I think that's 100% right. I think where it becomes a little bit complicated is where you try and give exactly the same service to everybody. Now, the reality is that it's not every kid that signs up for a practice that has the same aspirations or the same level or the same motivation as others. So what we're seeing at the moment is that pooling everyone together, although they're having access to the same coaches, the same drills, the same pedagogy, is it's not adapted to everybody. You might have a kid that signed up for 2 practices a week because his parent thinks it's a good idea, but the kid has no interest in playing soccer. And you might have in exactly the same session that he's doing, you might have a kid that is much more advanced, has been playing soccer his whole life, that sleeps with a soccer ball under his pillow, and you've got 2 people at completely different ends of the spectrum. But not only are they at completely different ends of the spectrum technically, they're also motivationally. So you've got one kid that has no interest in getting to another level. He's there because he likes to run around and maybe see some of his friends. You've got one that would like to play at a higher level, whatever that higher level might be. So that is the biggest challenge, definitely, that we've seen. And I think the CDC, as it's written on paper at the moment, although the idea is fantastic, and the idea that coaches and clubs should be talking to each other every week and trying to adapt the teams based on the level of the other team and stuff like that, that's unrealistic. It's I don't want to say impossible, because very little is impossible, but it's very unrealistic. And what we're seeing at the moment, in my opinion, is that we're pulling the players towards the bottom. So we're giving access to everybody, but the level of intervention is becoming a little bit is becoming a little bit less. I think less appropriate for the players that are of that at a stage of development that need a bit more attention.
Yeah. I could tell you one thing that I'd like to see improved, and it's something maybe you have been around. So, like I said, for my son, I've been watching the different drills of the CDC, and and I get they want to make them fun, and it's great, and he's 8 years old, he's U9, but I think now at this age, he's already last year he was starting to understand a bit more. And he sees me watch soccer, sits down, watches soccer, and he's the type of kid that he'll watch a bit, but not too crazy about watching it, but loves to play it when I drag him or when he gets there, right? But he asked me something the other day, and it was so strange, and again, it opened my eyes to look at the drills more carefully. He's like, "Daddy, we never shoot on net." He's like, "We keep on doing drills, and the only time we can shoot is during a game. But what about the drills that teach you how to shoot?" And I was like, I turned around and I said, "Oh, Gianfranco, maybe you're not paying attention to the drill." But as I said that, I said, "You know what? He's right. A lot of the drills in the CDC have absolutely no end goal in terms of like, there's no finish. There's no concentration on the finished product, which is actually scoring a goal." And it brings me to this question here. For me, as a kid, remembering and playing soccer here in Canada, completely different experience than you in England, I love to shoot on net. I couldn't wait to shoot on net. I hated the whole practice, and I love to shoot on net. And one, it taught me how to shoot. Two, I was good at it, so I really like to shoot. And it gave me some pointers and some tips and some hints that I could use in the game without even knowing, and still having a good time. So like you see, online, the crossbar challenge, so on and so forth. That's great. But to score and to beat your fellow teammate, your keeper, there's some bragging rights there. So for you, mine is shooting. For you, what would you suggest? The two different age groups, U4 to U8 and U9 to U12. What would you suggest to make things a little bit more fun?
Yeah, I think my principle is generally that the environment teaches the kid, but so I would generally stay away from what we would consider to be linear pedagogy. So like you show a kid exactly how to shoot with what part of the laces, and then he, in a line, he kind of takes shots one after the other. And I would more try and incorporate it into some kind of situation where it finishes towards the goal. So something that they might see within a game, maybe with a partner, or maybe with an adversary or something like that. I think that can be adapted through all the ages. So obviously with U4s to U6s, it might be something, very silly, where they have their own ball, and there's just lots of kids running around, and at certain points of the session, they just get to run and kick with very little intervention. It's not what part of the foot are you shooting with. It's more just get the ball in the goal, and they'll kind of discover it as they go along. And I think modern coaching is moving away a little bit from there is an ideal way of doing anything, because so many elite athletes in all different sports have kind of shown us that that's not always the case. Having said that, I think yeah, shooting, I think it's really interesting that your son says that. And often kids come out with these fantastic, feedback lines that, you can do all the planning you want, you can go to all the coaching courses you want in the world, and a kid says one thing like that, and you're like, yeah, he's right. Why aren't we, doing
It's
it? And
exactly that, and it's something that I did some research to, hit up some people and wanted to know, like, I want to see all the CDC drills. I want to see them all, and I want to see the ones that have the end, like we said, where the goal is to actually score a goal. And I'm not saying, again, you said it perfectly. I'm not saying let's line them up and teach them how to shoot. I think I agree with you 89% of that statement, where they need to find it out themselves, but a little bit of guidance here and
yeah,
there
Sure.
from someone or from even a friend. Even them shooting together, one friend might be doing it this and say, "Hey, okay, maybe not at 9 years old, but yeah, maybe at 9 years old, they're talking to each other, and you hear the conversations, and you say, hey, man, they're having a conversation about how they can shoot. That's something that we haven't seen before.
But I think it's super important. I mean, first of all, scoring goals is the objective of football. So there's no getting around that. So unless you're at some point, showing kids what the goal of the game is, and yeah, we don't want to cut corners. We don't want to teach them, just to go to the goal at the quickest way possible necessarily, but they need to know the goal is there, and that's the objective of the game for sure. Um, and yeah, it's interesting that they kind of discuss between each other. But I would argue that within the CDC, it's first of all, it's not always easy logistically to organize the sessions when you have so many kids at so many different ability
That's
levels.
true.
That is one of the huge challenges of the CDC. But to find fun not drills is not really the right word, but fun games or fun sessions or whatever that they're able to finish with goals or shooting, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, your son said it best. I mean, he wants to do it because it's fun. If it's fun, he's going to learn. If he's doing it, he's going to want to come back. So it's a huge part of it. It has to be. The kids don't really know why they're making passes. I mean, it's good. It's part of it. It is fun to a certain extent, but like you said, I mean, almost all of us started playing football because we want to score goals.
Exactly. An hour in. Can't believe an hour in. And, thank you, Steven. We're going to wrap it up. I know you're very busy, want to get home. Some quick fire questions. Just, give me a one word answer, or I'm not going to answer. Who do you support in the EPL?
Tottenham Hotspurs.
Favorite coach?
Maurizio Pochettino.
Marito. Wow, very good. The first time we get that one. Your favorite player?
Harry Kane.
You even look like Harry Kane. Someone on Twitter said you look like Bertolacci. You don't want to look like Bertolacci. If you don't know who he is, you don't want to. Not that he's not a good-looking guy. He just didn't do very well at Milan after coming over from Roma. The player that you dislike the most.
Anyone that plays for Arsenal.
There's my next question. The team that you dislike the most?
Arsenal.
Pineapple on pizza.
No.
Good. And do you eat pasta?
Yeah, of course. I think
Yeah.
everyone does that now.
Okay. So then this is my signature question. This is a lot of pressure now. The little penny. You know penny? Penne pasta. Do you know what penne
Of
pasta
course,
is?
yeah.
Rigati, the ones with the little lines, or no lines?
I think it depends on the sauce.
Yeah, that's a cop out, but yeah, go ahead. You can still answer.
I would say with the lines because it holds more sauce.
See, that's for all everybody, the EPL and all the English people. He answered right. Fantastic. We have a question here from Claudio. Just before we wrap it up, would you like to see England and Canada in the same group of the World Cup?
No, only because I really would like to see Canada go far. They're definitely my second team. I want them to go as far as they can, but England is my team, so I don't really want to have to see England beat them. I'm afraid to say that, but or probably Canada beat England. Either way, I don't want to see
Either
it
way.
happen. Yeah.
What's your prediction for England in this World Cup?
I think they'll get further than Italy.
Yeah, thanks. President, Steven's off the show. Never coming back on. All jokes. Steven, I want to thank you very much from us here at Milan Weekly Podcast, us here at the local soccer show, President in the background. Thank you again to Evangelista Sport. Before we wrap it up, Steven, for the people who don't know you, tell them how they can get in. If they're in the anywhere of the regions of CSR, how they can get in contact with you guys and what you're doing at the club.
So through CSR, you can get in touch with us by our Facebook, Instagram, or our website. Through the region, anyone on the South Shore, it's pretty easy to do.
Excellent. Steven, I want to thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thank you to the people that are going to watch this tomorrow on their jog or on their walk in the morning or at lunchtime or whenever you watch the local soccer show. Guys, I'm Stevie P. Marcello's in the background, Presidente, and Steven. We're going to sign off. Guys, please share this with your clubs, share this with your friends. The local soccer show, we're going to take it to another level. Ciao. Wrap it up.